Welcome back, guys. Today's episode I am sharing. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Now let's begin. I'm recording this at 3:03 a.m. because that's when I always wake up now. It started while I was still working overnights, but it didn't stop after I quit. Tonight I tried to go back to sleep, but the room kept rearranging itself in the dark, familiar things feeling a few inches too far to reach. The blue vest is in its box in the closet. I keep the lid taped shut, even though nothing's going to crawl out of it except a smell. Floor wax, freezer air, warm plastic, and the powdery scent of cardboard that's been torn open too fast. People think the day crew knows the store. They don't. The store is quietest when the last customer leaves, but it isn't still. You learn the building's habits on the graveyard shift. The way the HVAC exhales against the ceiling tiles. The way the floor scrubber leaves a ribbon of darker shine your shoes find without looking. The way the fixtures ping and settle like cooling metal even though they're just shelves. The lights hum in two keys, and if you listen long enough your heartbeat picks one. Mine used to go with the lower note. I can catalog my time there the way I used to scan end caps and pallets, in little flashes, each with a tag and a code. The handhelds would chirp and throw back whatever number the shelf label thought it owned, and sometimes, especially between 2 and 4 a.m., you'd swear the labels didn't want to agree with each other. It's probably just the way print looks under tired eyes. The brain tries to turn the store into a map. That's what they trained us to do. Keep the map inside so you can D a case of something blindfolded if you have to. But a map is a lie that stays convenient. At night sometimes, the building made you notice the lie. We all had ways of keeping ourselves awake. Some people kept their earbuds tucked up under their hood, one bud in an ear not that management would notice. Some kept a sour coffee sweating in a paper cup, a thing to lift and sip on a loop. I counted steps. From the time clock in the back hallway to the break room microwave, 57. From the seasonal bay to the garden double doors, 106. From pharmacy to electronics, walking slow, 209. It kept me anchored, or I told myself it did. I didn't start counting until the night the aisle stopped being the length I knew. That's how you can tell when something starts. You notice yourself inventing a habit to defend against it. It should have been a normal night. We'd had a truck, but it wasn't a big one, and half the pallets were soft lines. My manager was in a mood that made everyone quieter, but that's also normal. I remember there was a floor model tent pitched in seasonal even though it was October. I remember because when I walked by it the first time, it made me think of a mouth, open and waiting, and that was before anything had happened. I chalked it up to the coffee. If I tell it in order, it sounds small. It was just inventory. We do those little audit counts all the time. Scan, count, reconcile, move on. But that night when I put the vest on, the polyester stuck at my collarbone and I had to peel it away like it wanted to stay. The zipper teeth were cold. My badge clipped on upside down, and when I flipped it the right way, I could feel my face on the laminate, a kid trying to look like they weren't. The handheld scanner always takes a second to wake up like it's wading through syrup. I remember the start screen bleeding into my reflection, and the way my thumb knew the passcode without thinking. I had a count list that hopped between categories, light bulbs, pet treats, plastic totes, because someone up front needed mismatches fixed. It was after 2 a.m. by the time I hit hardware. That's when the store feels like a house after a party, the air a little tepid, confetti of shrink-wrapped tails underfoot, the sky outside washed out gray through the garden roof. There's a point in aisle 27 where the lights buzz louder. If you stand under it too long, your fillings itch. I avoid it by habit. That night the count pushed me closer to it, and I kept my head down. Barcode, beep, shelf, barcode, beep, shelf. My breath didn't sound like mine inside the mask. The waxed floor hummed under the ladder's casters, even when I wasn't moving it, as if someone else was. When I looked up, the end cap with the big red rollback sign wasn't as near as it should have been. I told myself the perspective was off, the way long aisles compress and trick you into thinking the exit is a reward you aren't getting yet. I took 2 steps, then 3, and the end cap slid forward like it was on a track. It shouldn't have bothered me, but my throat closed like I was swallowing air that didn't want to go down. I backed out, rolled the ladder to electrical, counted a bay I didn't need to count just to rinse the feeling out. The ladders squeal no matter how much you oil them. That night it was a little less squeal, a little more animal. The handheld glitched for half a second and flashed a screen I didn't recognize, a pale gray with one line of text I couldn't read fast enough. I told myself I'd brushed something. The handhelds are old. Their menus hide behind each other like rooms with the lights off. The intercom clicked on with the little breath it takes before it speaks. You learn to half listen to it, to decode the cadence of announcements without hearing the words. But this wasn't a code. It was a voice like the ones in the training videos, level and precise, but the quiet had changed around it. It felt like the store leaned in. Asset protection to aisle, a little hiss, a shape around the number that didn't form. It would have been funny if I'd been less tired, the speaker losing its nerve. Asset protection to aisle 0. The word 0 popped cleanly like a bubble. Aisle 0 isn't a thing. We joke about it during mods when the planogram looks like math. I stared at my radio like it would answer me back. I didn't move at first. Another click, then a different tone. Our manager, sleep-frayed. AP, ignore that, sorry, wrong button. You don't get to ask questions when your boss sounds tight. So I pretended to ignore it. I kept scanning, but the call was a burr in my ear. The handheld buzzed against my palm, and without meaning to, I started counting steps again. 1, 2, 3. The floor scrubber ghosted past the end of the aisle, no operator in the seat. I told myself someone parked it with the brush still spinning. Sometimes they do that to dry the floor faster. The smell of wet rubber rose up and folded into the other smells until it felt normal, like everything else. Then the intercom again, softer, like someone had turned their mouth toward the mic instead of speaking across it. My name. It said my name the way no one in that building could, the way my grandmother did, accent bending the second syllable. There was no code after it, no request, just my name, spoken once, then the little click of someone taking their finger off the button, and the silence where the store forgot to start buzzing again. I don't know how long I stood there. My skin went tight around. And my hands. If there's a moment you understand you've lost a tiny piece of the map, it feels like that. I told myself a story right then, because that's what you do when your body starts to listen to the darkness like it has something to say. The manager had fat-fingered the general page. Maybe she'd been reading a list and my name stuck in her mouth. Maybe someone by the service desk pressed a button as a joke and said the first name they could think of. Maybe the speaker over my head had a short that made voices shave off their edges and sound familiar. You stack reasons like boxes until the wall looks sturdy. I rolled the ladder away like I was tired of it, casual, not like I wanted a thicker aisle, and called into my radio soft, "Copy." No one answered. I found the nearest coworker, Bobby from Pets, eyes sagging, a chain of skids like a spine behind him. "Did you hear that page?" I kept it light. He perked up like anyone does when they think they missed a code, hungry to be useful. "Which one?" I said the words together. "My name, aisle 0. He smiled the way people do when something doesn't fit in their head yet. Someone's messing with you. That answer is candy and cardboard at the same time. Sweet, then nothing. The rest of the shift tasted like battery. My tongue didn't fit in my mouth right. I kept catching myself glancing up at the ceiling speakers like they were cameras. Every noise had a shadow under it. The tent in seasonal looked wider when I passed it, cloth walls breathing in the air from garden like an animal asleep. The handheld was heavier than it usually was. I kept switching hands, fingertips numb the way they get if you spend too long counting change. At one point, I put my palm flat against the cinder block wall between receiving and the back hallway and felt a tremor under the paint. Not a thump, not a rodent, but something like a distant train, and I had to pull away because it felt like I might catch it, like a chill. I told myself the Essers were kicking on. I told myself the store is a machine. That script can carry you for miles. I didn't ask the manager about it when we huddled for the end-of-shift rundown. She looked like she'd peeled her face off and put it back on wrong. The last thing you want is to hand your weird to someone else and watch them hand it back named. I clocked out. Outside, the sky was the color of a fluorescent tube before it warms up. The parking lot edges were soft with fog. A cart drifted a foot and stopped like it had lost interest. My car door handle felt colder than the air. The radio turned on by itself. I remembered I'd left it like that. Little things add up. They do. But they don't equal a page that says your name right when it never has before. At home, I shoved the vest into the box and taped it closed like I could trap the night's air with it. I went straight for the shower without turning on the bathroom fan. Steam made the mirror a blank coin. I tried to tuck the evening into my rationalist's pocket. Sleep debt, the end cap illusion, the human brain hearing patterns in white noise the way we see faces in knotty wood. People hear what they're primed to hear. I looked up pareidolia like a talisman. I put on a show to iron my thoughts flat and woke up on the couch with the TV asking if I was still watching. That was the first time I woke at 3:03. The time meant nothing to me then. It was just a number, like counts on a sheet, like a UPC code you memorize because you punch it too often. I looked at the microwave clock in the blue dark and felt the shape of the minute, the way you feel the shape of a word in your mouth. It stained the rest of my day a little. By the time I went back for the next shift, I'd half convinced myself I'd imagined it. You have to if you want to go back. You fold the map, ignore the crease. I didn't tell anyone else for a while. When I finally did, weeks later, it came out thin, like I was trying to make it lighter in my mouth so it would float away. The friend I told nodded too fast and said, "That speaker by Toys does that sometimes too." That should have made it easier. Instead, my jaw felt locked for the rest of the night, like I was holding on to something with my teeth. Every page after that, even the normal ones, made me look up, and that's how it starts. Not with blood, not with a scream, just with your name said back to you by a ceiling that isn't supposed to talk like it knows you. A week or so after the page with my name, we started a mod reset that ran from housewares through toys. If you've never done one, it's like moving into a place that already has all its furniture bolted down, and you have to pretend the bolts are optional. We slid gondola units by inches, popped shelf pins with our thumbs until they were sore, and fed new header cards into frames that snapped shut on your knuckles if you weren't careful. The air was gluey with the smell of adhesive and paper dust, like school supplies and printer ink. Down on the tile, curls of old shelf label backing stuck to my soles, so I carried a little parade of gray confetti wherever I went. Management taped up the planogram grids in plastic sleeves. Aisle numbers printed crisp, bay numbers like tiny scars. On paper, it was clean. In your head, it's simple. Aisle 24, 25, 26, straight shot to the end cap with toy aisles blooming out into color. On a good night, the plan makes you feel competent, like you can make a mess line up. But we were behind, and the radio was a constant throat clearing in the ceiling. That hum again. The lights and 2 keys, plus the floor scrubber's drag, plus our carts. The store never really falls quiet during mods. It fidgets. I'd slept 4 hours, give or take. I remember Biche. Because I did the math in my car in the parking lot the way you bargain with yourself. 4 is enough to do a shift. The coffee will carry you to lunch. The body is a machine if you tell it to be. Bobby from Pets brought me a roll of rollback Starburst for the end caps and swiped one for himself, pressing it flat against his hoodie like a merit badge. He said, "Action Alley's a traffic jam." And that was true. End caps half-built. Dump bins like low islands, pallets wrapped in sunburned plastic because the day crew had parked them in a shaft of light. We laughed about the plan, calling the main walkway A0. "Aisle 0, he said, and made a ghost noise. It was the kind of joke that helps your hands keep moving. A0 is just a label on a drawing, a way to pretend a void has a number. I wasn't thinking about the page with my name, or I told myself I wasn't. I was thinking about bay tags, and whether I had enough 12-inch paper hooks to rebuild an entire wall of flashlight pegs. I was thinking about the taste of burnt coffee and the way my shoulders twitch after too long reaching for the top shelf. I was thinking about the click of header frames, about the dry static sting you get if you drag a shelf across the carpet and back too fast. It was a practical brain. Do this, then that. Don't make it bigger than it is. Keep the map inside your head matching the paper. From seasonal to toys is a straight line. 106 of my slow steps, if you cut through housewares. The garden center doors seeped a cool draft that smelled like wet hose and potting soil. The greenhouse fans clacked and coasted. I could have walked it blind, I told myself. I could have counted it without looking up. That's what makes you brave at night. The belief that the building will be the same one you left an hour ago, that it will keep the deal you made with it. You move and it stays still. That's the trade. The handheld logged me in fine for once. It chirped like a friendly bird. The first count was nozzle attachments, then light bulbs, then an empty bay we were going to fill with little metal bins that cut your fingers. It felt like a normal, slow tide of work, the kind that makes your brain go quiet enough to be safe. I told myself that and kept telling myself that as my steps ferried me closer to the aisle that would not sit where the paper said it should. You can hear the shift if you're honest. You just call it something else. It was after 2 a.m. when I noticed it. The store had that washed-out backstage feel. We'd killed half the end cap lights to save energy, so the far distance looked like a dream of a store. Every shelf edge white, every void gray. I needed to pull a peg plan from the mod cart we'd parked at the far toy end. I took my usual line, cut through housewares, past the towering stacks of storage totes that made the aisle feel narrower. I counted steps. 1, 2, 3. Somewhere in the 20s, my heel clipped a floor sign and scooted it. A little slap against tile. When I looked up, the overhead aisle marker should have read 24. It said 23. I'd miscounted, that's all. I went one aisle over and stared up again. 24. Okay. The map slid back into place. I turned right toward toys. From this direction, you run past battery end caps, then household cleaners, then plastic laundry baskets. Then it opens up. I walked, and the aisle felt longer than usual, like running on a treadmill set one notch faster than you think. The air got cooler. The buzz above my head shifted into a higher note, like the ballast in a different zone had decided to take over. I told myself it was because we'd killed the end cap lights. Shadows make distance look complicated. I walked until I was sure I should see color, the bright boom of toy boxes, but the shelves ahead were still aluminum ribs and empty pegs. The signage above me was fresh, blue ink, sharp and clean, but the number wasn't 25. It wasn't any number I recognized. It was a round white disc with a printed 0. I stopped under it like a puppet whose strings had tangled. Aisle 0, I said out loud because I wanted to make it stupid. My radio hissed like it was remembering static. The handheld screen, which I hadn't touched, lit and blinked a location code I didn't know how to get to through the normal menus. A003. I told myself this is the label the plan uses for Action Alley. Sometimes the system calls things a name you don't. That was reasonable, except I was not in Action Alley. I was boxed in, shelves on both sides, no end cap visible, just a narrowing until the air felt thin. I turned around. Behind me, the aisle I'd walked down looked normal. The distant toy sections, faintly colored, the mop bucket we'd abandoned like a sentinel. I took one step toward that normalness. The radio clicked, a small, polite throat. The intercom voice came on without the usual preamble beep or the breathy start, just a steady, flat presence, too clean, like a training video in a bright room. Asset protection to aisle 0. Not the manager, not anyone's voice I knew. The thought that it could be a recording made my mouth dry. We don't have a recording for that. We don't have a reason to page a place that doesn't exist. I should have laughed. I should have called back. On my way. I should have walked out the way I came. Instead, I did the thing you do when you're trying to prove to yourself you're awake. I tested it like a seam. I backed into the aisle until the 0 hung right over me. Then I faced the other way and walked. The shelves threw back my footsteps a half beat late, like they were answering. The peg hooks on my left were already labeled with little clear tags, but no product names, just strings of zeros, key placeholders that never got filled. A breath of air moved over my hands with the weight of an open freezer case. I could hear garden even though I wasn't that close, the roof fans making a coin flip sound, a soft clack, clack, clack. I counted steps. My anchor. 1, 2, 3. At 30, the space pinched a little tighter. At 40, the hum picked up. At 50, my thumb ached where it had pressed the scanner too long, but I hadn't touched it. When I turned the handheld face up, the clock in the corner had stopped at 3:03, even though my body knew it wasn't that late yet. That's not unusual, you tell yourself. Handhelds freeze. They take bad naps. I tapped the screen, and it hesitated, then gave me a gray pane with a field I couldn't read before it vanished. To either side, the shelf labels had started to look wrong. Not old exactly, but like they belonged to a sister store built in a year when fonts were bolder. There was a weird nostalgia in it that made me want to say someone else's name. The voice came again, closer, or the speakers just better placed here. My name, pronounced right. To aisle 0. The speed bump in the middle was the sort of glitch you get when someone doesn't hold the mic down long enough. A polite little mistake. I took one more step and the tile under my shoe clicked. A sound I recognized from the main walkway, hollow, more space under it. My brain finally kicked in and said, that's A0. You're standing where the building thinks the aisle breaks. I turned and took a long, deliberate walk back the way I came, not running, not hurrying, pretending the experiment was my idea. When I reached the mop bucket guard at the end, the sign over my head read 25, like it always had. The color bled back into the shelves to the right. Legos, board games, a wall of electric blues and reds. Like someone unmuted the TV. I looked behind me, no 0. Just the long, normal aisle I should have remembered without counting. I didn't tell anyone then. I pulled the peg plan off the cart with stiff hands and pretended to be annoyed about how many clip strips I was going to have to set. I made my face boring. That's something you learn in retail. How to put on a face that says the job is the whole world and you are content to breathe inside its borders. Bobby rolled by with an empty pallet jack, whistling a tune I almost recognized. He said, "You get lost?" Because I'd stood too long where I was, and I said, just ignoring the plan like always, and we both laughed because the only thing worse than the plan is ignoring it. The laugh felt like I'd swallowed something that wasn't made for swallowing, corners pressing throat soft. I kept returning to that spot in my head even while my body went on with the shift. I rebuilt a flashlight wall. I reset an end cap to match the glossy photo on the mod sheet. I cut my finger on a torn shelf edge and sucked the blood off my knuckle, surprised by how metallic it tasted, how childish the impulse was. The world stayed stubbornly normal. The handheld clock corrected itself when I woke it again. The radio crackled with mundane things, a manager asking for a price check, someone needing a trash run, Bobby asking if anyone had seen the big orange pallet wrap cutter that always disappears. If you don't want to know a thing, the shift gives you plenty of noise to drown it in. When I did circle back to the aisle later because I had to, because the mod map demanded it, the 0 wasn't there. From one direction 24, from the other 25. I even tried walking wrong on purpose, took a slow, deliberate step count that matched what I thought I remembered, and it stayed the kind of aisle you don't have to think about. The speakers were just speakers, the tiles were just tiles. I told myself the intercom voice earlier was someone playing. Someone had found an old training tap. Ian patched it into the paging system for a joke. If you say something out loud with a shrug in your tone, sometimes it comes true, or at least it stops sitting on your chest. I shrugged into the air for an audience of none. On break, I sat in the back room and didn't scroll my phone. The vending machine hummed and shook like it was full of something alive, a poster with safety slogans curled at the corners like a leaf. I watched the microwave clock tick and tried to catch it in a mistake. It didn't make one. 2:41, 2:42, 2:43. I tried to assemble the logic of the building in my head the way we do before inventory. This many aisles, this many bays, this many end caps. I made an A0-shaped hole and stuffed it all into that. Action alley, that's what the system calls it. That explains the handheld. As for the ceiling voice, the training voice is a coincidence. There are coincidences. If you work nights long enough, they clump together and you forgive the way they feel like a pattern. On the way out at the end of shift, I walked the same path on purpose, this time with the store awake, lights fully on, the day leaking in under the automatic doors, the little sludge of morning in the air that smells like mopped tile and the first customer's coffee. The aisle numbers matched. The 0 was nowhere, not even in the sense of a misprinted sign or a fallen header leaned against a rack. It would be a better story if I'd found a physical thing to hold. The best I got was a smudge of sticker residue on my finger from running my hand along a shelf edge like it could apologize. On my day off, I Googled whether our company's planograms ever label something A0. They do. I found a PDF with a training example that used the term. I stared at the screenshot until the words unfocused and the little blocks dissolved into nothing. When I closed my eyes, the aisle was still there, narrow and cooled, the 0 puckered white above it like a suggestion you could walk into. I tried to explain it to a friend by text and erased the message before I hit send. The part that makes me feel stupid is that nothing happened. Nothing happened except the map got one new bend in it I couldn't iron flat. That night, I woke at 3:03 again because that's my new trick. I got water in the kitchen without turning the light on. The dark had the exact amount of weight the store has at 2 in the morning when half the end cap lights are dead and the air is glue scent and the hum picks a different key for your heart. I stood there and held my breath and listened for a voice that would make a number out of nothing. It didn't come. I went back to bed and slept like someone who's about to be told a secret by a ceiling that doesn't have a mouth. The front doors have their own weather. You learn that on asset protection shifts more than stocking. How the outside pushes in little pressure changes, how the mats breathe, how the air in the vestibule tastes like wintergreen and damp cart handles and the faint metal of the EAS pedestals. Daylight flattens everything and makes you feel exposed. After dark, the glass turns the parking lot into an aquarium where the cars are cold fish gliding on a black current. Standing post there is like being stuck between two lungs breathing at different tempos. They'd roped me into a stretch up front, short-staffed, a couple of call-outs, a rash of walk-offs that felt like a pattern if you wanted it to be. Just float, the manager said, that smile that's more a request than a smile. Be a presence. Presence just means be a person-shaped object in a place where people might do what they shouldn't. The floor was clean enough to squeak. The slide of the automatic doors made a sound like a throat clearing politely, over and over. On the cart corral, an orange cleaner rag dangled like a tired flag. The coin machine clicked and counted in monotone. Somewhere close, a child's shoes chirped with each step and then got swallowed by the rest of the store's noise. In that light, cold on one side, warmer on the other, I'd never felt more awake and more not there. My vest felt like a sign that had been left out in the rain and rehung. The overnight aisles still lived in my legs. I could feel 106 steps to garden like a phantom limb. Maybe that's why the greeting hit me sideways and felt heavier than it should. He was posted at the threshold like they used to do it, hands folded, a roll of faded smiley stickers in his palm that looked old enough to leave brown rings where the adhesive had gone tired. Soft blue vest, scuffed shoes polished down to the leather's bones. The name badge wasn't ew. Our current style, and not the last one either, one of those in-between designs, the kind that makes a new hire look like a ghost from an HR slideshow. "Welcome home," he said, and it landed like a joke I wasn't in on. Not welcome to Walmart, not the cadence that lives in my head forever. He said it like he'd been practicing it for me, not for customers. Not too big, not too soft. The R in home dissolved a little. The smile was perfect and watery-eyed, a kind that wants to take your coat. I kept moving because stopping would make it real. You learn that too. Bodies in motion don't believe what they've heard until the air has had a chance to thin it out. I did a little lap of the vestibule, checked the spill station, looked like I was deciding whether the sanitizer wipes needed refilling. There was no reason to be rattled by a greeting. Maybe corporate had sent the old roll back in a limited way for the holidays, the way they rebrand ideas they once decided they didn't need. People greeter becomes customer host, becomes who knows. And plenty of retirees get hired for that post, and plenty of those faces get blank in your memory until you see them and your brain acts like it knew them all along. I told myself I was reacting to how much I'd been in the building lately. If you spend more hours under these lights than in your own kitchen, the line between welcome and warning gets thin. Still, on my loop back, I looked at the badge. The man's name was one of those amiable antiques, Earl or Frank or Lionel, something that lives in a pocket watch in a father's stories. The clip pin had a little rust thumbprint at the edge. He had the old vest stitching too, the kind we phased out 2 rebrands ago, before the yellow piping, before the sparkle. It looked too crisp to be a thrift store find, not crisp enough to be new. He watched customers with a serene, practiced attention. Strollers punctured the vestibule air. The scanner pedestals kept quiet. People passed him and got the standard line. When I passed again, off to the returns desk to stand around and make my shape matter, he turned his head in a way that made me feel pre-remembered and said it again, warmer, as if he were finishing a sentence we'd started together. "Welcome home." I nodded like it didn't touch me. A presence. I held that line and made it through an hour of the doors breathing in and out, the cashiers calling calls, the intercom paging in neutral voice tones that were trying not to mean things. I didn't ask anyone about him. Asking puts weight on something you might prefer to be cotton light, and if it floats, you don't have to chase it. I told myself to be normal longer than my skin wanted to be. 2 weeks later, I was across town, a loner body for the other store's evening rush because shrink doesn't respect zip codes. Every building has its own weather, but the architecture rhymes. The same glass mouth opening to the same vestibule breath, the same limp paper notices taped near the carts, the same heavy smell of rubber and rain dragged inside on wheels. Different faces, same choreography. The managers there treated me like a visiting cousin, grateful, distant. I took my place near the doors, made a study of the steady stream, tried to be seen without looking like I needed to. But he was there like the door had conjured him. Same scuffed shoes, left toe creased in a white half-moon, right heel worn to a little lean. Same old badge that didn't match this store's style either. He stood on the mat with his hands folded exactly the way hands fold on a church program. Customers flowed around him like he was part of the fixtures. He looked up when I came through from checking a cart cluster that wanted to become a problem and gave me the smile, neat at the edges. "Welcome home," he said, and something in me hiccuped. He was looking at me, not past me. There's an intimacy to being greeted that way by a stranger in your work clothes. You want to argue that he means the store, any store, all stores, that it's just words, that he says it to everyone. But no one else got that line. I watched him 3 interactions long. Welcome to Walmart for a mother with a toddler. Evening for a man with a toolbox. Welcome home for me. I have a scar on the back of my right hand from a box cutter slip. The way he glanced at it made the skin around it feel new, like he recognized me by it. I can't prove that's what I saw. Memory is a bad witness if you stare at it too hard. I left him in his vestibule weather and went to find the AP office like I was just reminding myself where it was, not hiding. Doors, camera monitors, a desk that always smells like old coffee and permanent marker. A manager followed me in and asked, casual, if I could pull a quick clip. A customer who swore a self-check attendant had been rude wanted the footage. I latched onto the ask like a life raft, something concrete, a time, a camera number, a task that ends. I pulled the clip and waited for the cartoon of thumbnails to line up, my reflection sliding around the black screen. While the software chewed on it, I clicked over to the vestibule camera out of habit, the way you look at a wound to see if it's still bleeding. The door scene came up washed in that strange half-light the cameras favor. Too much green. Faces turned to pale coins. The timestamp had hiccups like they all do, seconds skipping forward under a pressure you can't see. I scrubbed back to right before I'd come inside. The old man in the frame stood in a halo of the automatic doors opening and closing. On one pass, he looked like somebody's grandfather dressed for a shift, thinning hair slicked back with effort, smile practiced. On the next, the software's face smearing made him look 13 frames younger, cheeks filled out, gait less careful. His vest seemed to try on different designs every few seconds, old stitching, then the more recent spark, then something that looked like the truly old denim with a sewn-on badge. I told myself the camera's compression did that, the way motion makes everything flicker in layers. I reversed and watched again. It didn't correct. He reached into his palm for a sticker, and the roll didn't exist for a dozen frames, then appeared again, then showed as a white blur that could have been anything. I took the frame where I'd walked in and let it run. On screen, I raised my hand in a small wave. He leaned in a fraction and said it. I couldn't hear him. We don't pipe audio, and even if we did, the vestibule is a blender. But I knew exactly where my mouth tightened, and it tightened at the phrase, "Welcome home." The timestamp in the corner jittered, and for one frame only, then another. It read 3:03, even though the clock on the office wall was hunched at 7:18 p.m. I paused and blew it up, pixelated into squares that looked like bath. Room tile. The manager behind me said, "You good?" The way someone asks to stand in your space without asking what you're looking at. I clicked back to the self-check clip like I'd been listening all along. Later, with a less busy patch laid over the doors, I asked the floor manager about the greeter, kept it casual as I could. "Who's on door tonight?" "He's good." The manager glanced automatically toward the vestibule like you do when you agree with a compliment and frowned. "We haven't had a greeter on nights in months. Hosts cover when they can, but tonight's just..." He jerked his chin toward a teenage kid scanning receipts between scanning their phone. "Why?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. "Nothing," I said, and I heard how unconvincing it sounded. "Just thought I recognized him." He said, "We used to have a Lionel here, years ago. He retired. He passed, actually," dropping the last word like it had weight you shouldn't slam down. He didn't look like someone making a joke. On my way out that night, I checked the door again. He wasn't standing there. The kid with the phone was. A roll of stickers sat on a podium nobody ever uses, edges browned like something that shouldn't be sticky anymore. I felt watched from somewhere at shoulder height, the way the EAS pedestals watch. Polite, indifferent, absolute. The back of the store has its own climate, warmer by the compactor, cooler by the dock doors where the seal never sits just right and the wind threads itself under the rubber like a petty thief. The concrete is dust-soft and gritty at the same time, painted lines worn to ghosts by pallet jacks that carve the same routes over and over. A radio on low in the maintenance closet murmurs a station nobody chose, always one song behind whatever is stuck in your head. Back here, the store feels like a factory that misplaced its main product. Just boxes and air and the idea of movement. Even the smell tells you what time it is. Fresh cardboard and wood when the truck's been unloaded. Warm dust and brake smell from the dock levelers when you're between loads. Toward morning, a sour tang from the baler that says, "We fed it too many straps too fast." We're one story. We say it all the time, like a reassurance. No mezzanine, no upstairs office, no weird half-level where old signage goes to die. A flat rectangle full of aisles, nothing above you but ceiling, grid, and roof. The building makes a promise with that. It says everything here is on one plane. Even the racking and receiving stops short of making a second floor out of itself. You can climb a rolling ladder and be the highest thing around for a brief, conquerable second, then you come down. There's comfort in that clarity after the aisles have played their tricks. A world is easier to map when it doesn't have a second dimension you have to worry about. It was a light truck night, fewer pallets than usual, half of them soft goods that squash like bread if you stack them wrong. The dock doors were down. It had started raining after midnight. That thin rain that polishes the asphalt to a mirror and makes forklifts squeal, so we kept the inside sealed to save the floor. Bobby had been sent to claims to untangle returns. I was doing a pass through the cage, counting the little things that go missing when a store exhales. Headphones, controllers, razor packs, the stuff that tells you more about people than you want to know. My scanner threw numbers back with a lazy reluctance, as if it knew I would trust them anyway. The clock over the time clock lagged half a minute behind the handheld. You get used to which clock belongs to which minute in any store. You pick your favorite lie and use it. There are rumors all buildings tell about themselves if you ask the right people. The right people are usually the ones who have been here long enough to be bored by everything except their own boredom. Carla from Crafts once told me that when they poured this slab, some contractor misread a note and cut a chase up through the cinder block on the far receiving wall like they were making a path for something that never arrived. Another associate swore there used to be a mezzanine at a sister store across town, a catwalk where old signage was stored for eras until someone tripped and legal shut it down. You hear one story enough times and it glues itself to your building whether it belongs there or not. We joke about third-floor receiving when the freight looks endless. "Send it up." My manager rolls her eyes and says, Yeah, take the elevator." An elevator is a sound before it's anything else. Not the well-behaved beep we pipe into customers' ears up front, but the layered hum of a machine preparing itself to move a box inside a building, the motor's patient build, the guillotine roll of heavy parts sliding into place. I grew up visiting a hospital with my aunt. The freight elevator there made a noise that felt like a big animal settling down, followed by a bell that never thought of being cute, a purely functional ding that meant an arrival and a choice. I hadn't thought of that in years until the back room started telling me about a place it couldn't have. I first noticed it as an absence. The dock levelers stopped their little nervous ticks, and even the bailers' intermittent sighs paused. The quiet gathered like a polite crowd and then stood back. I could feel something vibrate under my shoes, not an earthquake, not a train, just a deep hum pressed into the concrete the way a cat's purr is pressed into your ribs if you let it lay there. I put my palm against the cinder block by Dock 5 and felt a chill that made the hair on the back of my hand lift. The seam between two blocks had a crack line of darker paint, like the wall had shrugged once and then decided to pretend it hadn't moved. I told myself I was picking up the bailer through the wall. I told myself the air curtain by the doors was cycling, but my mouth had gone dry in that way it does when you are remembering something you haven't yet experienced. "Hey," Bobby's voice came soft over the radio, preoccupied. "Claims printer's jammed again. Anyone got a minute?" His normal complaint should have punctured the feeling. It didn't. Somewhere behind it, threaded through the building's bones, I could hear a motor deciding which way to pull. The perimeter lights under the dock doors flickered once, as if a load had been taken on by something under the floor. I watched the safety chains by the dock roll a lazy inch and settle, like the air had acquired a direction that wasn't in the plan. "We don't have an elevator. There's nowhere to go." It was around 2:30 when the hum found a shape. I had set down the handheld on the metal lip of the claim shelf to free my fingers to wrestle a clamshell package open without slicing my thumb. The scanner responded to being put down by waking all the way up, some sleep mode glitch I could never predict, and in the wash of its shallow glow I saw the clock in the top corner smear itself into new numbers. 3-0, then it blinked and stuttered. And returned to the minute it should have been. I might have ignored that. Screen's hiccup. The fluorescent above me buzzed, held its breath, and resumed. That 2 heartbeats pause that always feels longer. Then the bell. Not loud. Not a cheerful welcome to shopping. A steady single note like a thought made audible. Ding. It lives in a category your brain doesn't know how to misfile. If you've ever stood in a service corridor and waited with a dolly to move linens or trash or pastry carts up or down, you know the pitch. Logistics ding, not sales floor ding. Arrival, not alarm. I froze because a part of me knew the next sound, not with conscious knowledge, but with the kind of low animal memory you can't talk yourself out of. Metal shifting, a door sliding, the scissor snick of something retracting. My palm pressed the cinder block harder than I meant it to, and there was motion under it, like the wall exhaling through its seams. "Did you hear that?" I said into my radio without meaning to push the button, and I heard my voice come back at me tinny and thinned out. Bobby came back with an unbothered, "Hear what?" the way you say it when you think your friend is primed to jump. I almost said, "Nothing," but it wasn't nothing. It was an elevator arriving somewhere within 10 feet of my body in a building that has nowhere to go but flat. I followed the fishbone of air that had snuck into the room. It came from a spot between Dock 4 and Dock 5 where the paint color didn't quite match. If you stare at walls long enough, you learn how many shades of off-white one hardware supplier can invent. This was closer to bone than the rest, fresh paint sitting a gloss stage above its neighbors. At shin height, 2 chips had come off in the exact path a pallet corner would make if someone had misjudged inches and razored by. The chips exposed a rectangle underlayer that felt smoother. Then cinder block under my fingertips, a scar where a thing used to be. I put my ear to it, the cold bit cartilage. I couldn't hear the machinery anymore, but the concrete had that living feeling, like putting your ear to someone's chest and hearing body noises you can't name. And then, close enough to make my skin feel borrowed. A tiny thunk, like the landing of an industrial latch and the softest shiver of metal, the way a door thinks about opening before it commits. The bell sounded again, the exact same pitch, politely identical, and from habit I looked up to where a floor indicator might be if we lived in a reality that would give me one. Ceiling grid, dust around the sprinkler head, nothing else. My handheld buzzed against the metal shelf lip and woke its screen again. It had opened a location field I didn't know how to access. Black text on gray, the shorthand for our aisles and bays, except it wasn't an aisle. It was a string that started with L, like level or location or something my brain insisted on deciding was a floor. L2 our rec. I tapped the screen and it flashed back to our normal inventory app and then locked itself like I had done something to offend it. The dock clock above the doors, our most honest liar, flicked its minute forward, and when I blinked it had skipped a number. 302 to 304. My body insisted that somewhere in there a 3 had existed. It was like watching a cashier void a line item without the machine admitting it had ever been there. A draft braided out of that not quite matching paint rectangle and found my ankles. It smelled like oil and cold iron, and the faint perfume of damp wood pallets. It wasn't the clean freezer cold we all know. It was the kind of cold pulled up from an unlit space. I stepped back without knowing I was doing it. The bailer across from me knocked once, a delicate sound, as if something inside had settled. The chain dangling from the dock door nearest me quivered enough to tinkle against its latch. The radio crackled with an unlabeled click. Then the intercom voice, not ours, but the training room, too articulate voice, spoke with zero preamble. Freight arriving. 2 words. Crisp like the edges on a laminated sign. Not truck at the dock. Not anything we would ever page. It clicked off mid-breath as if someone remembered to be careful. I stood there expecting the wall to do the movie thing, to part, to groan, to reveal. It didn't. The hum peaked and softened like something had been decided. Bobby rounded the corner holding a roll of tape like a trophy. Printers spitting out labels like confetti, he said, and when he saw me not moving, he paused. You good? I couldn't make my mouth manufacture a normal. I said, do you hear that? And he cocked his head and frowned into the ordinary air of receiving. We both listened. The room resumed its regular life effortlessly. A wheel squeaked somewhere. The ceiling breathed. He shrugged and made the face people make when they decide not to enter your story. You need coffee, he said, and grinned, and went back to his tangle. I put my palm back to the wall as if to prove it could be a wall again. It felt like a wall, which somehow made me feel worse. The next morning, with the store softened into its day version, I asked a question like I was just curious about the building, the way people get curious about where the breaker panel lives. I asked maintenance if there had ever been an old elevator well, some structural thing left over, some feature capped and painted and forgotten. He laughed without looking away from his clipboard. In this shoebox? Nah. They build these like cereal boxes. If an elevator was on the plan, you'd see the bump forever. He might be right. He probably is. There's comfort in certain kinds of confidence. It lets you set a thing down. Later, sorting claims, Carla said, back when they were breaking ground, someone told me there was going to be a mezz. Legal wanted a catwalk in receiving for overstock. Then they cheaped out. She said it like gossip about someone else's vacation, shrugging the idea off with a flick. She didn't say it had anything to do with us. I held both answers in my mouth like 2 halves of a hard candy I didn't want to admit I was saving. I tried to make a list of sounds back there that might masquerade as what I heard. The bailer when it changes gears, the dock levelers when a truck caves in the lip, a pallet jack dropped hard on the wrong side of a plate. The little bell someone stuck by the back door for receiving notifications years ago that sometimes gets nudged and rings a polite hello. The air curtain at the doors when its thermostat gets weird. The coin sorter up front pinging through 10 layers of store and my brain assigning it a different place. If you make a list powerful enough, you can sit on it and feel taller. But the thing that got me wasn't even the bell. It was the minute I lost. I know what 303 feels like now. My body is tuned to it the way some people hear their name in a crowded room. To watch the dock clock hop over it like a skipped heartbeat made me feel like I was standing in a slice of time that had been laid on top of us like a thin extra floor. The part of my brain designed to handle the mundane logistics of a store, the part that likes checklists and cycle counts and matching a peg to a picture, has nowhere to put that. There's no field for impossible on any form we fill out back there. The next shift, I pretended I had to check the dock seals and found my way back to the rectangle of mismatched paint. In daylight, the difference was invisible. Only at certain angles did it show. 1 degree more gloss, 2 shades closer to bone. I pressed my ear there and got a headache from the cold wall. No bell. No breath of machinery, just building. When a truck finally did back into Dock 5 later that afternoon, the leveler clanged down with its normal vid. Olens. and I nearly laughed with relief. Relief feels like stupidity until you notice you can breathe again. I toyed with recording the back sound on my phone the next night. I walked back at 2:40 and set it face up on the claims shelf like I'd misplaced it. I busied my hands with returns and let the room do what it does. The recording caught the world plainly. The squeal of a jack, the cough of a distant associate, my own breath louder than I wanted. No bell. When I went to stop it, the timer read 0022, and I knew I'd left it there longer than that. The clock over the time clock read 3:04. My handheld, in its own reality, said 2:58. If time is a product in that room, nobody's auditing it. Since the elevator that isn't, there's a vertical weight to the building I can't shake. In grocery, I'll look up at the blank above the cereal run and imagine a second layer where a person could walk, invisible to the floor, hearing only the hum and the bell and the entirety of the place moving like a sleeping animal. In the apartment, I draw a breath when the microwave's done beep happens, ready for a different pitch. In the middle of the night, 3:03 slides up around me like a floor arriving. Sometimes I wake half standing, like my body heard a door opening somewhere and wanted to meet it. I haven't told the manager. There's no appropriate time to say, I think something in the back wants to move me up a level that was never built. The closest I came was telling Bobby I keep feeling a draft by Dock 5, and he said, yeah, that seal's trash, and asked if I could help him untangle a mess of bubble mailers. It's safer to let the explanation be thin as long as it covers the right area on the map. Besides, the building has learned my name. It's learned the minute I will be awake. If it wants to add a direction to the choices in my head, it's doing it slowly, like someone teaching a dog a trick by saying the word in the tone of a different word. Up is a suggestion. Ding is a suggestion. I keep wondering where that elevator would deliver me if I pressed the button with no label and didn't ask questions. I keep not pressing it and still feeling the floor shift. Customer service has a different gravity than the rest of the store. The lights feel sharper there, like they've been tuned for honesty. The counter laminate remembers every returned blender and busted toy and pair of jeans that fit everywhere except the one place that mattered. The pen on a chain makes a faint, infinite circle scratch on the counter where nervous hands pass it back and forth. The receipt printer breathes out little curls of paper that want to coil like potato peels in a sink, and if you leave them too long, the humidity makes the ink bleed until the timestamps look like they were printed underwater. On asset protection nights, they have you park yourself near the desk when Shrink has a bad month. Presence, again. Smile without being friendly. Watch without being a cop. You learn a lot standing there. Returns aren't just things. They're little stories people want erased or paused or refiled as someone else's problem. We pivot between policy and mercy. 90 days with receipt, 30 on electronics. Unopened this, same tender back to card. Without receipt, its lowest price in X days on a gift card. ID must be valid, and there's the third-party system hovering in the background like a quiet judge, sometimes stamping DENIED for reasons that feel like horoscopes. The desk has its own smells, hand sanitizer with a bite of cheap vodka, the metallic tang of coin and ink, and the faint sweetness of whatever's lurking in the return bin. Shampoo and gummy vitamins, dryer sheets bleeding through their packaging. The register drawer slides open on a soft hydraulic sigh that in the quiet after 10 p.m. can feel too loud. We keep spare rolls of stickers under the counter, a roll of fragile tape, a stack of privacy sleeves for cards that nobody uses. The bell on the counter is a joke, a relic from a time when we wanted to pretend we were a little motel. We'd had a run of odd returns that week, sealed electronics with weights in the boxes, shampoo swapped for colored water, stuff that makes you eye everyone a little meaner than you want to. It was a Tuesday night dressed up as a Sunday. Rain had slicked the parking lot and the doors sighed people in small damp bursts. The intercom had been quiet. No code this, no roaming manager voice pep. Just the background hum and the occasional beep from self-checkout when someone used a produce code for something green but not that green. I was nursing a stale coffee that tasted like paper in the inside of a microwave when the supervisor handed me a stack of wrinkle-soft receipts to log. The paper felt tired. The TC numbers blurred at the edges if you stared long enough. I rubbed my thumb against the little black barcodes like I could warm the data up. Behind me, the camera monitor looped through our usual angles in that washed-out green that makes everyone look like they live under a pond. In my vest pocket, my handheld kept vibrating for attention like a kid tugging a sleeve. Miscount here, mislabel there. The store's way of saying it remembers every little lie and wants you to make the numbers shake hands. They train you not to take returns personally. Someone bought something, now they don't want it. It's not about you. but the accumulation of the desk feels personal after midnight. People are softer at the edges, even when they're hard. You see the way someone holds a broken thing like it's a piece of their bad day they're offering you. You see a lot of hands. Old hands, tight hands, hands that won't let go until the bit of paper in your printer tells them they can. The music they pipe across the store always feels one beat too cheerful at that counter. It's hard to hum along when you're standing where things come back. I was thinking about the elevator bell that wasn't an elevator and telling myself not to think about it when she stepped up with something cupped in both palms like a small animal. She was one of those women you can't pin to a decade, face smooth and tired at the same time, hair pulled back with an elastic that had given up some of its faith. Her coat had that old closet smell, wool and lavender sachet and rain. She set the object down on the counter gently like it could bruise, a little tin music box, the kind you crank with a finger hooked in a small handle. The paint was scuffed into a pattern that looked like it could have been kittens or moons once. Hard to tell now. There was a sticker on the underside, browned and bubbled at the edges, with a price stamped in a font that made my head want to say a year without me deciding to think about it. Above the numbers, a logo. Not ours. Not anyone's now. A store name your tongue knows from other people's stories. A brand that lives best on eBay auctions and in the nostalgia corners of the internet. The kind of logo that carries its own dust. "I need to return this," she said. Her voice had been crying recently or was thinking about it. "It doesn't play right." She turned the crank a half turn and let it flutter free. The tune wobbled out, 3 notes that made my scalp prickle because I recognized them from nowhere and everywhere. A lullaby shape. Not Twinkle, not quite Brahms, a cousin of both. The tin threw the sound up into the bright air of the desk and made it feel colder. "Do you have the receipt?" I asked in the tone we reserve for people who don't. The question is a ritual. Sometimes the shape of a thing is what matters. She dipped a hand into her coat pocket and brought out a wad of paper folded until tears in the fibers had become their own rivers. I flattened it with my fingers, felt its thinness. The print was a ghost, store number that wasn't ours, a lane number, a time that made my stomach flex. 0303. The date above it, 4 digits that put it a few years before I existed in any useful way. A day that had become a story people tell about themselves when they want to explain how we became this version of ourselves. The paper itself was older than the printers we use now. Where a modern receipt makes ink sit up on the surface like a decal, this one had let the numbers sink into it like memory. "Where did you buy this?" I asked, stupid question. The logo was right there. She said the name like it tasted like something that took years to stop tasting in a town. "They said I could return it anywhere," she added, and that could be true in a human way. Someone did say that once, somewhere. That's how language works. It attaches and gets passed along until it arrives at a counter in the wrong decade. Policy brain kicked in because that's the rope I grab when the ground gets a little tilt. "We can try to look it up by card," I said, and she took out a wallet older than the card sleeves we give out, flipped it open to a license made in a style I've only seen in those "remember when" posts. The laminate edges had curled. The expiration date lived in a year that made me tired. When I tried to scan the back, the reader blinked like my cat when a dust mote hits her eye. No good read. I typed her name into the return system, the on-screen keyboard heavy under my fingers, and when the search spun itself, it hiccuped. The interface I know, the blue-gray of it, the tabs like dull teeth, went pale as a washed shirt and flashed a window I'd never seen. "Receipt found," it announced in a font our registers don't use, black on white like a memo from a different office. Below it, transaction details that made no sense and perfect sense. Item, tin music box, depth 05, vendor DSQ 000, tender, cash, store, blank, lane, 4, date, 10/12, time, 0303. The absence of store number was a punchline only if I wanted to laugh. The last 4 digits of the TC were 4 zeros. I looked up at her and she was watching me with this careful openness, like a dog waits to hear if you're saying food or fool. "Can I just undo it?" she said. "It doesn't play the right song anymore." The box was quiet. My eyes went to the drawer without meaning to, and it slid out on its soft rails the way it does when a cash transaction starts, except no tender was on the screen. My hand hadn't brushed the button. There was no button for that part of the process. The air that rolled out of the drawer had a basement chill to it and the smell of pennies you've kept in your hand too long, iron and fingerprints and damp paper. My supervisor, 3 steps away, didn't look up. The bell at the desk rang itself with a tiny, polite ding that skated across my skin. I should have called for a manager override. I should have hit a hard key and backed out of the screen. Instead, I moved as if the script had written itself under my hands. I scanned the box even though the UPC was too scuffed to read. The scanner caught nothing and everything, beeped, and the line appeared in the cart as if a hand had written it into a ledger. Price, the number on the sticker, honest to the logo. Tax, 0. Refund due, the same amount laid out like a lesson. I folded a piece of receipt paper up to cushion the little thing under my hands. Ridicule. Laws, and it felt warmer than it had any right to. Cash back? I heard myself say, and she nodded, weary with being asked permission to be given what someone else had taken. I pulled bills from the drawer, our bills, crispish, nothing special, and stacked them under the counter for a second because I suddenly didn't want to feel her skin when I gave them to her. I printed the return receipt, and the printer coughed out a strip that should have said our store number at the top right, our address, our phone. It blanked those lines like a redacted file. The TC at the bottom ended in 0303. The register chimed a noise it uses for anything and nothing, and then went back to breathing. She cupped the bills as if I'd handed her something to keep warm. "Thank you," she said in a tone that made me feel like I'd carved a small piece of a larger grief away for her. She left the box on the counter. "Do you want—" I started. Silly question, because you can want and not want at the same time. "No," she said. "It's not right anymore." The tune it didn't play hung in my head like a shadow of a melody. I watched her pass the EAS pedestals and expected the sound for an unpaid item to bark. They stayed polite. The doors breathed her out into the rain. The little tin sat there like a closed eye. I picked it up and flipped it over because I wanted a physical explanation you could hold. The sticker looked like it would leave a ghost circle on the laminate if I peeled it. I didn't. The song surfaced when I turned the handle. Those same first 3 notes shy and off, like someone humming to themselves in the next room. I heard the garden center chimes from 2 chapters of my life away. The way they had tried to play a lullaby, none of us taught them. I put the box down softer than it deserved. "Everything good?" my supervisor asked without looking away from the screen where she was squinting at a gift card balance. "Lady had a receipt from elsewhere," I said, keeping my voice flat, disrespectfully calm to my own pounding heart. "Cash return," I added, because if you keep the nouns and verbs where people expect them, they don't look for the adjectives you're hiding. She nodded, distracted. "Log it under exception," she said. The word exception is useful in retail the way duct tape is useful in a house. I took the receipt the system had spit out and looked for something I could call a mistake. The paper felt like ours. The font wasn't. The header line where our store number normally stares at you like an ID in a bouncer's hand was as empty as a blank stare. I checked the transaction history. The return existed there, clean as anything, nested among toothpaste and laundry soap like it belonged. I half expected it to be gone already. Some sort of tear in the ledger that heals itself if you don't look. It stayed. The drawer clicked a soft click on its own, as if annoyed to be open, and slid shut like a mouth deciding not to argue. I took the box back to AP office later because it felt irresponsible to leave it in the return bin with leaky shampoo and a busted curling iron. I set it on the desk next to the monitors and rewound the vestibule angle to watch the woman go. The camera, generous in its usual greenish way, made her look serene. The timestamp in the corner hiccuped and declared 0303 for 2 frames as she cleared the pedestals and stepped into the wet aquarium of parking lot light, then snapped back to 9:22 p.m. The lenses always smear the past across the present. That's what pixels are for. I told myself that while my throat tightened around a laugh I didn't want to have. Back on the floor, I asked Carla from Crafts, who knows everything about everything that happened in this zip code before I was old enough to read logos, if she remembered the store name on the sticker. "Oh yeah," she said, nostrils flaring with the smell of old signage like people do when they get a chance to be expert. "My mom swore by their layaway. They went under when I was in middle school. She told me where the last one had been. A building with a weird carpet store in it now, an address that sits in that soft part of your brain where things don't have to be updated." "Why?" she asked, and I rolled a shoulder like the answer wasn't important enough to burden the air. "Came in on a return," I said. She accepted that the way we accept weather. I listed my explanations the way I have learned to list them. Thrift store price sticker never removed. Nostalgia retail. People bring weird stuff to normal places. Our system sometimes eats a foreign character in a header and blanks the line. ID scanners hate old licenses. The drawer mechanism is touchy. A vibration from the counter can trip it. The third-party receipt lookup has access to data we don't understand. People see patterns when they are tired enough. All true. None satisfying. Over and over. The time. 303. The zeros in the skew, neat as teeth. The way the printer chose a font like it was remembering a version of itself it had never been. The box lived in the AP desk drawer for a week. It made the drawer smell like copper and cardboard. Sometimes when I was alone in there, I'd take it out and set it on the mouse pad and wind it just enough to get those 3 notes. The third would hang like it wanted a fourth we didn't stock. I tried to Google the melody with the fragments in my mouth and got nowhere but a headache. One night I forgot to lock the office when I went out to walk self-checkout, and when I came back, the box was sitting an inch to the right of where I'd left it, the handle terse. Ned to a different angle, like someone had been impatient with it. No one had gone in. I checked the camera feeds with a focus I save for fights and missing items. The desk chair had rolled a little on its own. The AC kicks on and moves air molecules 1,000 tiny ways. We tell each other that for comfort. At home, I checked my own receipts. It's a funny habit now, finding 303 hiding in totals, in TC endings, in the time on the microwave when my insomnia puts a finger in my sternum and says, "Wake." I threw a load of laundry in at a time the machine didn't deserve and listened to the clunk of a zipper and thought about the drawer sighing open for me without my help. In the morning, I texted a friend a photo of the old logo without context, then deleted it before the little delivered checkmark finished thinking. It's not that I think I took money from the wrong place and gave it to someone who belonged to a different ledger. It's that the desk did what it does, processed a return, and the store refused to tell me which world it used as its map, and so it moved a little closer to my bed. The meat side of the building has a different sort of quiet. It's not the library hush we pretend the sales floor has after 10. It's a machine quiet, a work quiet. The prep room sits like a steel mouth between the floor and the walk-ins. You learn to tuck your shoulders in when you pass it. There's always a knife mid-polish, a tray mid-wrap, water pooling where a hose got set down for a second too long. The air is colder there even before you open anything, a degree or two stolen through the seals. It smells like clean steel and damp cardboard, and that thin iron tang raw meat never fully gives away. It's not a smell you notice at first. It's the one that stays on your hands if you forget to wash them twice. AP floats. That's the way the job works. 1 hour you're near the doors with a smile you mean and don't. The next you're in electronics pretending you know which cable someone needs. Then you're counting razors in a locked case. Then someone taps us. You on the radio with "Can you do temps?" because 2 people called out and the HexP log doesn't care. The logs are a religion. Every cooler, every freezer, every day, every shift. Write the number down, sign your name, own it if the number is wrong. I've watched managers talk to thermometers like gamblers talk to dice. If temp is safe, food is safe. That's the math. The building likes math. It's how it convinces you it's reasonable. I was already tuned too tight that week. Welcome home still catching on the back of my teeth, the elevator bell standing up my arm hair and receiving, the little tin music box thinking about a song and then not playing it. So the idea of a cold room appealed to the smaller animal in me. Cold shrinks things. Cold makes air feel thin and honest. They handed me the clipboard with the sheet still crisp on the top and a hanging thermometer, the cheap kind with blue alcohol in a glass tube, printed numbers that never quite line up with reality. The prep associate, new kid, quiet, a forearm tattoo half under his sleeve of a chain of knives that would have gotten me yelled at when I started, nodded me toward the doors with a "sorry, man," like any of this was his fault. There are 2 walk-ins back there that matter, the deep freeze and the meat cooler. The freezer is mean cold, breath-stealing, everything hard edges and frost feathers on every surface. The cooler is a different animal, the inside of a held breath, 30-something degrees, a little wetter than you want it to be, air that moves over your skin and makes you feel pre-goosebumped. They keep the boxes stacked neat on steel racks, each box stamped with a date and a promise. You can tell if a place is run right by whether those dates march in order. Ours mostly do. I told myself I was just going to sign a line, make a cylinder of air into a number, and move on. The meat cooler door is a thick, heavy thing with a mind of its own. It closes like a decision. The outside has the big pry handle. The inside has the oversized safety latch they teach you in orientation. You will not be locked in here. That's the deal we made with the law after a few too many horror stories. I've smacked that latch with mittened hands in other jobs, and it has always given like a polite friend. There's a vinyl strip curtain inside the frame to hold the cold. I hate the slap of those strips when they touch my face. They always feel like something alive tested your perimeter and lost interest. As I clocked my steps past bakery toward meat, I tried not to count. 1, 2, don't. The floor changed under me from the gloss of the aisles to the rougher, more practical concrete of back of house. A mop leaned against a sink like it had been arrested mid-crime. The prep kid was wrestling saran wrap off a mound of beef like the wrap was trying to teach him patience. "Just the cooler," he said, relief in his voice, as if he was grateful it wasn't him. He handed me an extra hairnet without looking like it was personal. The door's gaskets sighed when I tugged. The strip curtain shivered and slapped. The cold reached for the sweat on the inside of my mask like a mouth. Inside, the light has a weird honesty, too white, too shadowless. The fans above, the evaporators, make a low helicopter sound with no rhythm, a constant pushing. There's a drain somewhere that never learned to be quiet. My breath came back to me in a thin cloud, then thinned out. I took in the row of racks, the box labels facing out like a million little eyes. Everything held still. I took the temperature at eye level because that's where you're supposed to, then lower, then high because we're not animals, we document. 35, 34. The cheap blue alcohol in the tube hovered in indecision and then rose the tiniest line like it had been consulted. I wrote the number down, my gloves squeaking on the paper, and thought, cold, clean, count out. A quick errand. The radio on my shoulder crackled with ordinary chatter. The world, as much as it ever is, was in compliance. There's a weight to those doors when they shut that you feel in your knees. I let it fall behind me because that's the way it wants to go, and my body didn't flinch. I've been inside one 1,000 times. The safety lever looms at shoulder level, a friendly bird's head of metal you can hit with anything you like and it will give. It always gives. It's the deal. I keep repeating that. It's the deal. The first oddity was small and petty. I touched the lever with 2 fingers to test it, and for a heartbeat it stuck like an icy tongue to a metal railing. My glove squeaked in a way rubber squeaks when it's thinking about losing. The skin under my fingernails went tight with cold. I told myself the handle had a little condensation from someone who'd been in and out. Happens. I warmed my fingers under my armpit and went back to making the blue line become a number the log would accept. A walk-in makes time elastic. You feel the seconds slightly slower, padded by cold air. I wrote the digits, signed the line, printed my letters plain because no one likes a signature you can't read when it's your name on a number that could make someone sick if it's wrong. The fans throbbing above me sounded louder on the second minute than on the first. Somewhere behind the racks, the strip curtain shuddered like someone brushed it. When I turned to go, my palm rode the inside lever longer than it needed to because my hand didn't trust itself. The metal felt like a coin you've had in your mouth too long. I pressed down, expecting the little give, that almost cheerful click, the door's relief at being allowed to pen. It didn't. There was the tiniest movement, enough to make the latch feel alive, but the door stayed meaningfully a door. I pressed harder. It thunked in a way that meant it had met its own body. The gasket squealed, stuck to itself. I didn't panic. I hit it again, this time with the heel of my palm. The safety mechanism is designed for mittens and elbows in the worst day of your life. It gave another grudging half-inch and then settled back like someone pressing a hand against the other side, polite and immovable. The fans overhead hiccuped, a little dip in pitch, and the light, only because my fear was already looking for evidence, seemed to go gray at the edges. "Hey," I said, because we say hey to things like they can answer. My radio was a dull block of useless on my shoulder. The walk-in eats signals. That's not a haunting. That's a Faraday cage of meat and metal doing what it does. I hit the lever again. The vinyl strips mocked me with their position. Still, still, still. I tried the trick I learned from a produce guy once, pressing the door away with my shoulder as I hit the latch, giving it a little twist, the way you talk to a stubborn jar lid. It moved again and came back, shyer this time. That's when the voice came, not through the door, not through the radio. Through the metal, through the kind of distance that makes your bones feel like they have something to do besides hold you up. It said my name. Not wrong, not exactly. It said it like my grandmother saying it across a house, letters stretched a little by age and distance, syllables bent toward a second language that shaped her mouth. It didn't sound like a human right outside. It sounded like something using the building to carry the shape of me back to me. I froze in a way that made the cold finally climb into my wrists. "Hold on," I said, reflex, answering the way you answer when someone you love can't get the key in the lock and you're on the other side. My breath came back at me in a small fog that didn't dissipate as fast as the last one had. The light shifted again, not a flicker, Mo. Rear like a dimmer slid down 2 degrees. The soft emergency glow strip over the door, one of those pointless pieces of compliance that never helps, bloomed as if it had been waiting to be useful. The fans pressed their noise down an inch and then resumed, like they had ducked for a thrown object. I palmed the lever harder and finished the motion with a little anger in it because anger is warm. Something in the hinge moaned a brief metal complaint and the door unpeeled a fraction more from its frame. A breath of store air snuck in, warmer than it had any right to be. I could have shoved and been done. I could have muscled through. Every line of my body knows exactly how much force that door likes, and I almost did. But the sound of my name laced itself through the box and sat down behind my ribs. The syllables felt wet. There was another sound too, not voice, a soft pat of something placed and lifted, placed and lifted. Small, flat contacts. I looked down without meaning to. The floor in there is not anything special. Pitted concrete, always damp, always a little blackened at the corners, a drain that accepts and resents everything. Across that floor, curving neatly around the end of the first rack and then the second, was a constellation of prints in the thin sheen of condensate. Not shoe prints, not treads or arcs. The clear oval of heels, the moons of toes, the little roll line where a foot presses across before lifting. Bare feet. Not dripping, not a puddle, just the right shine on the skin pressed into cold concrete, the way a handprint on a mirror looks before it fades. They curved in like a sentence and stopped an arm's length behind me. There were no matching prints leading back to the door, no entry, just arrival. My brain did what it always does with impossible things. It scanned for a trick, a leak, a hose, a worker in too big a hurry stepping in with soaked sock. It tried every picture in its file and none fit. The radio pressed cold into the top of my shoulder where it had slid crooked. I swallowed and felt how loud a swallow is in a cold room. The lever moved then with almost no resistance at all, like the door had decided to remember the deal. The plastic strips whispered. Warm store air washed my knees. The fans went back to the rhythm they had before I got there, and the emergency strip over the lintel dimmed itself like a bad conscience calming down. I stepped backward through the slit I'd made and pulled the door with me because it felt unbearable to turn my back on it while it was still open. Before the strips fell into place, I looked once more at the floor. The prints were already dulling, the cold taking their edge, the water giving itself back to air. Only the last two remained bright in the spread of the light. The last two were mine, except they weren't mine. I was wearing shoes. Outside the door, the world resumed its habit. Knives tapping steel, the prep kid's plastic clinging to itself with static, the radio finding its breath to report something about a spill in seasonal. My hands shook. You don't notice when that starts, only after, when the thing you're holding makes your knuckles knock on it. I set the clipboard down next to the sink, too carefully to be normal. The prep kid glanced up because motion is language, and my body was speaking it wrong. "You good?" he asked over the low chopper noise of the fans that never stop. He had a rash of cold red on the backs of his hands. I said, "Door sticks." A safe complaint, one anyone could own. He nodded with an empathy that was more sop than interest. "Yeah, hinge is janky," he said, and went back to cutting tape with a motion you can do without looking after the second hour. That should have been enough to iron the moment flat. People say true sentences near a weird thing, and the weird thing gets shy and leaves. I went back to the door because not looking felt like agreeing with it. I pushed it open a shallow angle and stood deliberately just outside the strip curtain's foul reach. Cold slid over my wrists again. The floor inside was already writing over itself. The prints were smudges now, the cold doing its slow erase. I told myself what those shapes could be. Condensation falls in patterns. A drop hits and spreads and gets picked up by a warm surface, leaving a mark shaped not unlike a toe. A box corner with a little condensation on it gets set down briefly. 4 fast marks that could be stupidly arranged by chance to suggest what your brain is primed to see. The drain burps. The temperature of a person thinking about being scared will raise the thin water on the concrete just enough to map a line it has no business mapping. I repeated all of that. A mantra helps, even if you know it's one. I pressed my palm against the inside lever lightly, like you touch a bruise between checks. It felt normal now, not even cold. The glove didn't squeak. The lever remembered how to be a lever. The deal was back on. There's a ridiculous anger that comes when a thing returns itself to the world after visiting you from a different one. I wanted to kick the curb of the door the way you kick a soda machine for eating your quarters. The prep kid said, conversational because silence in a cold room is an invitation. "You ever hear the thing about the cooler?" His tone didn't have that campfire curl to it. He said it like weather. I said, "What thing?" He shrugged inside his hairnet. "Old guys say you can hear the old compressor through the wall next to the saw if the fans fall out of sync, and—" He hesitated, rewrapped his tape around his hand like he was pausing in a sentence. "They say a kid got lost once, years ago during a code atom, and they locked down and he came out of meat with bare feet. Probably just a story. Floors are wet." He smiled like he didn't love that story, but he liked owning it. My throat felt like it would. Still full of the cooler's air. "Probably," I said, and made my voice match his. My own shoes felt heavy with the idea of being wet. When I scrubbed my hand later in the bathroom, the inside of my right palm stung more than the cold could account for. A thin line of skin had lifted at the base of my fingers, the kind of peel you get when you grab something too cold with skin that expects to be treated gently. The shape of it, if you're inclined to pattern, could have been mistaken for a small map. I'd like to say I didn't look for a zero in the lines. I'd like to say I didn't think about the elevator bell in my bones when the paper towel dispenser gave me exactly one sheet and I had to wave again to pull the second. I'd like to say I didn't hear my name echo quietly off the tile like a pipe carrying water that remembers what it held. Back at the desk, I put the HACCP log in the binder and signed my name under the number. That part matters. Names matter. I wrote mine like a person who might be asked about it later and want to tell the truth. The ink bled a little on the page. Humidity stays in the paper overnight. The time I marked from the wall clock was 2:58. When I looked up at the handheld out of reflex, the minute in its corner, for a second and not a second, was 3:03. It isn't that the minute is magic, it's that my body thinks it is. That's what fear does. It makes the familiar into a sign, and then pretends the sign was there first. On the way out, I detoured through meat because avoidance is a shout in the language of a building, and I didn't want to speak it out loud. The floor in the cooler was just a floor. No prints, no gloss. The vinyl strips hung like tired tongues. The emergency strip above the door didn't see me and stayed off. The lever was just a lever. I pressed it once because you have to, and it gave with the easy cheerfulness of a mechanism in compliance. I almost laughed at myself for thinking compliance was a personality. At home, I stood with the refrigerator door open longer too. Han, you're supposed to, and let cold spill onto my knees. The handles didn't stick. My name didn't come through the condenser coils. Still, when the freezer's ice maker dumped cubes with a sound like someone setting down small wet things in sequence, my back tightened and wouldn't let go. In the shower, I looked at the tile and thought ridiculous things about footprints. The mind is a dumb inventor when it's given the job of making sense of a place that says your name back to you. I haven't avoided the walk-in since. If anything, I find myself inventing reasons to go. Exposure therapy, I guess, or the greed of a person who wants a better version of a story to tell themselves. Each time the door works, the building gets a shade less powerful. Each time the fans dip and find their rhythm a fraction more. And yet, the next time I see condensation on the concrete, my eyes will measure shapes before my thinking catches up. The next time I hear my name, my back will understand it before my ears do. The building keeps teaching me what kinds of silence belong to which rooms. The cooler's silence sits in my chest like a held breath I haven't let go of yet. I don't know if I ever will.